I work at a convenience store, situated at the corner of a small shopping strip. Essentially, it's like a local, downsized version of a 7-Eleven. My shifts typically begin at 3 a.m. and wrap up by 1 p.m. I opted for these morning shifts because they're typically the slowest, requiring minimal effort. My tasks involve assisting customers, restocking shelves, and taking out the trash, leaving me with little to occupy my time. During the incident I'm recounting, it was the middle of winter, although I reside in a warmer region where rain is more common than snow. On this particular day, there was a gentle drizzle outside, enough to dissuade most people from venturing out. During these early mornings, I often find myself leaning against the front of the building, enjoying a smoke to pass the time. It's not exactly permitted, but with no one around to enforce the rules, I indulge myself. The shopping strip where our store is located houses around 8 or 9 other establishments, all operating on regular hours. Consequently, none of them are typically open until around 6 or 7 in the morning. So, when I spotted a car pulling into the parking lot while I was outside smoking, it seemed only natural to assume they were heading to our convenience store. After stubbing out my cigarette and disposing of it in the trash, I made my way back inside and around the corner. With little to occupy my time, I found myself simply waiting for customers to come and go, so I could return to my solitary boredom. However, after a few minutes passed without any sign of activity, I grew curious and retraced my steps around the corner to check outside the door. To my surprise, the car I had noticed earlier was still parked nearby, but now with its headlights off. Peering through the rain-speckled windows, I couldn't discern any movement inside. This left me feeling puzzled, especially considering that all the other stores along the strip remained closed. After one final scan of the surroundings, finding no one in sight, I shut the door and retreated back inside. The next 30 minutes crawled by, during which I remained rooted to the same spot behind the counter, lost in my thoughts. Glancing at the clock, I realized that only a little over an hour had elapsed since the start of my shift. Feeling the need to break the monotony, I resolved to attend to the trash bins scattered around the store and dispose of their contents in the dumpster out back. I made my rounds to each trash bin, methodically replacing the filled bags with fresh ones and loading them onto the cart. Amidst this routine task, a faint click caught my attention from outside. It resembled the sound of something snapping or breaking, but with the rain drumming on the roof and the source of the noise seemingly distant, it proved impossible to pinpoint its origin. Strangely, I scarcely dwelled on it, dismissing it as merely another inconsequential sound characteristic of these aged buildings. After loading up the cart with all the trash bags, I wheeled it into the back room and unlocked the door leading to the dumpster area. Letting out a resigned sigh, I observed the rain intensifying outside. Naturally, it had to pour just when I needed to step out. Nevertheless, I braved the downpour, maneuvering the cart across the wet ground toward the dumpster stationed opposite the door. With a flick of my wrist, I disposed of the accumulated trash before turning to head back inside. However, something caught my eye. A door to the neighboring store stood ajar, a sight unfamiliar to me at this early hour. It prompted me to ponder the unusual occurrence. Seeking refuge from the rain, I retreated back inside the store. However, my curiosity about the adjacent store lingered, so I ventured out again, this time through the front door. As I approached the neighboring establishment, I noticed that all the lights were extinguished and the premises appeared securely locked up, much like it typically was at this hour. After mulling over the situation for a few moments, I concluded that I had nothing better to occupy my time with and returned outside by the dumpster. Approaching the open door once more, I found myself drawn to explore further. Inside, the absence of illumination hinted at emptiness, yet the space seemed to lead to a small closet-like room, presumably connected to the main store area. Mindful not to appear intrusive, I positioned myself in the doorway, merely observing. As I stood inside, a cacophony of movement emanated from the adjacent room. Footsteps, drawers opening and closing. The chaos suggested someone rummaging about, perhaps even making a mess. Concerned, I called out, "Hey, is everything okay in there?" hoping for a reassuring reply from a fellow worker in the neighboring store. Yet, the noises abruptly ceased, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. Sensing that something was amiss, I hesitated for a moment before swiftly retreating back into the rain, hastening my return to the safety of my own store. Upon returning to my store, a disconcerting realization struck me. The door I had just exited was missing its handle. In its place was merely an empty void where the handle and lock should have been. As my eyes trailed downward, I noticed that the object propping the door open was none other than the broken handle itself. Panic surged through me as I dashed back inside, securing all the doors and swiftly dialing 911, in addition to contacting my store manager. With reassurance that help was on its way, I pressed my ear against the shared wall between our stores, straining to discern any signs of the suspected robbery unfolding next door. The urgency of the situation became palpable as I detected hurried movements, footsteps echoing, objects being tossed or knocked over. It was apparent that the perpetrator was aware of my call to the authorities, prompting them to escalate their activities in a frenzy of haste. After enduring around 30 seconds to a minute of frenetic activity next door, I spotted flashing lights outside and heard the unmistakable wail of approaching sirens. The sound of hurried footsteps shifted to the back of the store, just as a chorus of loud voices erupted, presumably belonging to law enforcement officers. Moments later, I ventured to the back door and peered outside to find a less chaotic scene unfolding. Stepping out, I approached the officers, expressing gratitude for their prompt response and providing them with a detailed statement regarding the events that transpired. The apprehended individual was discovered in possession of a pillowcase brimming with stolen goods valued at nearly $6,000. In addition to this loot, he carried an unloaded firearm and an assortment of tools commonly utilized for breaking into doors and locks. Unbeknownst to me, he had also targeted the store located 2 spots down from ours. Whether or not he was aware of my presence during the break-in remains unclear. However, given that the lights in my store were illuminated, it seems improbable that he specifically targeted my establishment. Nevertheless, upon inspection, several sizable scratches were detected on the rear of our door handle, suggesting a previous, unsuccessful attempt to breach our security.